Good evening, everyone on YouTube. Tonight I'm going to be doing I wouldn't say necessarily top 10, but just 10 albums that changed my life. That's the best way I can put it. Um, these albums are going to be albums that when I heard them for the first time, it was just like my world changed. I had to have them. And a lot of these albums ended up made major influences on my music interests over my life. And I like doing videos like this because I like to hear from you all and like what kind of albums influenced you and got you into certain types of music. And one thing that's really always drawn me to the vinyl collecting is there's like a story behind everybody's albums. You know, uh, part of the part of the I guess the what's making vinyl getting a comeback, in my opinion, is just the intimacy, I guess, you would have with an album. You sit and look at the album and you get to look at the cover, and it's big and it's large, and you read the lyrics. People just aren't doing that anymore with digital, and I'm not trying to knock digital. I listen every day. I listen to digital music. It's just there's just something about the vinyl, and you can go to somebody who's had or collected vinyl in the past, and there's always great stories surrounding albums and where they were when they bought it and what kind of stuff they were going through their life. So yeah, I'm kind of doing this video just to see if I could get some of y'all to let me know, how you got to collecting, and what albums changed your life and influenced your music tastes. And yeah, just kind of a icebreaker for some of the people who watch my videos. So first off, I've got Metallica, Master of Puppets. In my opinion, one of the greatest metal albums of all time. I was very young when I got into Metallica. Some friends of mine were listening to them, and it was about the time that Injustice for All came out, so it was probably like 1988. Um, I heard that, and I heard this album, and as much as I love Injustice for All, this is the album that just, I mean, overall, start to finish, it's just a fantastic album. What I like about Metallica is it's heavy, but you get a lot of almost like classical guitar riffs in there. And they can go from like this melodic, beautiful guitar playing into just heavy metal in the same song. Battery starts out, kind of acoustic, and it goes right into heavy, but it just kind of this blend, and they just mastered that, especially on this album, Master of Puppets. It starts out heavy, 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 and then there's a part where it breaks down, and it just blends so well together, and the album's just beautiful. And then you have Orion, the instrumental album, just a great record. This album, like probably many others, spawned me into just listening to metal for the rest of my life. I know some of y'all who were probably born in the 60s and 70s, probably had that same feeling with Black Sabbath and, Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. But for me, it was this album, Master of Puppets. I'm going to try to keep it in the same realm, I guess, and we'll just go from there. As everybody's seen on probably looking at my other videos I recorded, y'all have seen this album pop up a few times. Meshuggah, nothing. When I heard this for the first time, it was just like jaw dropping. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The first song, this wasn't the first song I'd heard from Meshuggah. But the album itself, I think this was the first one I bought of theirs. And it was just because a buddy of mine had it, and I heard it, and I mean, what Meshuggah means to the metal world is, I mean, pretty close. I would say they're right on the same level as Metallica. I mean, what they've done, what they've influenced, and they almost created their own sound. You'll hear people refer to it as like gent, and they just, to listen to their timing, the drumming, I mean, just everything about it. The guitar player, when he's picking some of these songs, and it's just super fast, but it's just, when you really stop and think about what they're doing, it's pretty impressive. And if you've never heard Meshuggah and you're into metal, play this album first. And if you don't like it, then you don't like it. But this is a great one to start with if you're interested in it. I've got this set up now because when I bought that box set, it's in my other video. I had they misprinted it, so I ended up getting. I basically have the album twice, one misprinted and one not misprinted. Okay, moving on. I'll keep it kind of in the heavy metal. We'll move on to Mastodon, Crack the Sky. Mastodon's another band that, in my opinion, in the first 16 years of the 2000s, I think this is probably all around the best metal band out there right now. Their earlier work, starting with Remission and Leviathan, it was super heavy, just pure energy. And when they hit Blood Mountain and then moved on to this album, they started, I guess, experimenting. They were keeping to their roots from the heavy and just brutal, all-out energy, but they were starting to kind of transition into. You could tell their songwriting was developing and their music was developing. And when they hit this album, to me, it peaked. This album is just a masterpiece from start to finish. I remember listening to this for the first time, and I was kind of just set back by it. I remember listening to it, and I listened to the whole thing, and people were having some mixed reviews about it initially, and I had never heard it when I was hearing some of my buddies talk about it. So when mine came in the mail, I listened to it, and I just was, like I said, it was just kind of set back, and I was like, okay, that was pretty awesome. I need to process that one more time. So I replayed the whole thing again. And to this day, there's parts of this album where I get like chills. It's just so good that I get chills listening to it. Especially, when I listen to the Czar, this side 2, it's actually like one long song basically. It's just a beautiful album, and it's a shame because Mastodon, the album after this they released, got a lot of backlash because this album it's just one of those things where when a band releases something and it's so good that there's just it's almost like no way they can top it, and it's unfair sometimes to compare albums. Michael Jackson releases Thriller, and the next album after that, even though it may be a good album, it just sometimes people bash stuff like that, and I thought these guys got a lot of unfair treatment on the following record. But then this last album they put out is fantastic as well. But this album is it's just a masterpiece. The whole thing from start to finish. It's just a great record. So again, that's Crack the Sky from Mastodon. As I was younger, probably about the same time that I was getting into Metallica, this album was one that I heard, and again, the first time I heard it, just had to get it. I mean, it's just everything about it. This is Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy. This is the back cover. I mean, really, if you're into music at all, Led Zeppelin has to be somewhere, somehow on your list of albums, you know, or songs or artists that you've come across, that you've been into. I mean, just that band was just so dominant in the 70s. Big influence on heavy metal and metal music. But just overall, this album, I love Led Zeppelin 1, 2, I mean, all of them, but this is the one that it was just like I heard it. I had to get it. It was like mesmerized by it. So that's Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. As many kids in the 1990s that grew up, you're going to have this on their list. Nirvana, Nevermind. I mean, I can just remember buying this cassette tape and listening to it over and over and over again. It was just such a cool album. I mean, they just... You know, I guess it's just, there's just certain times where, you know, the time itself and everything surrounding that time, the time frame, can lay the tracks for this kind of situation to happen. You know, and leading up to Nirvana, Nevermind, you had, you know, Michael Jackson was still releasing singles, and he was topping the charts in his albums, and you had, I think it was like Garth Brooks was real big back then. But it was all hair metal, you know, leading up to that. You know, Guns N' Roses was really big too. But, you know, coming from the hair metal, and it was kind of getting ridiculous, and the makeup, and, you know, there's a lot of great bands, and I don't want to knock that time frame, but I think that there was just a point where people were starting to get tired of that. And... you know, underneath everything, you know, this was starting to develop, you know, the Seattle scene with Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and those guys. So when this came out, it just, I mean, 1991 in general, you had 10 from Pearl Jam, this record, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and just, there was a handful of others. I don't think Alice in Chains was either 90 or 91 when they put out, was it Dirt, I believe. But it just like boiled over. It was just like this massive amount of awesome music coming out at that time. And when this came out, it just changed everything. And I don't think there's been an album since then that has done that. And I'm still kind of waiting for it. You know, I always get excited about new artists and people who just kind of just do whatever, you know, and they just kind of come up with whatever, and they're able to kind of change the game. And I know it's a different time now because, you know, back in those days, it was what was on the radio, what was on MTV, watching music videos, and even going back into the 60s and 70s, you know, it was mainly, you know, buying records or watching them on television, or listening to them on the radio. So, you know, with nowadays, there's just so many more avenues. It's harder probably for something like this to come up, but start to finish, this album is just fantastic. I believe it was 1998 when this record came out. Yes, it was. This is a band called Refused. The album's Shape of punk to come. This album is just complete energy. It is just another one of those albums, and I'll probably say this on every one of these, that just, again, the whole purpose of the video, I couldn't get enough of it when I heard it. They kind of mixed, it was like just heavy, like hardcore album they had some jazz in there, and just the whole way the album's set up, if you listen to it, there's parts of it where it's like sounds like they're recording like a live track, and I just the whole setup of the album was just I never heard anything like it, and it is just a fantastic, heavy, like punk hardcore album, and to this day I can put it on, and is just such a great, I can't say it enough, just game changer when it came out. And if you're into heavy music and like punk and hardcore music, that kind of thing, or you're interested in getting into it, this is a great place to start. I'll change it up a little bit. I got a lot of heavy records on there. Neil Young Harvest. I was always into like heavier music and that kind of stuff when I was younger. I appreciated like kind of folk rock and folk music and stuff along that line, but I didn't really appreciate that until later on, years later. And one of the first albums when my mom gave me her collection, and I was going through her albums, she had this one, and I put it on for the first time, and it just blew me back. I was like, this is just such a great album from start to finish. It's hard to think, and I guess that's what a lot of these albums, what makes them so great, is they're like ahead of their time. And to me, I mean, this album is just so ahead of its time, and it's virtually all like acoustic kind of stuff. I mean, they got a band, obviously. There's the recording right there, but I can't say enough about it. It's a mellow album, but it's just the songwriting's fantastic. Fantastic, great album from start to finish, and another one that had me really glad that my mom had allowed me to inherit her collection, because she had that in there, and it was one of my favorites. As is Nirvana, Beatles. It's like you kind of almost have to have the Beatles, and I know there's a lot of anti-Beatles people out there, but I really didn't listen to the Beatles until my late teens, and I think the first album of theirs I heard was Let It Be, and I liked it a lot. But it wasn't until I heard Abbey Road that I just was blown away. Like I thought Let It Be was really good, but as an album from beginning to end, here's another one that just everything about it is just fantastic. And you look into the story behind it, and the Beatles were like pretty much on the outs when they made this album, and again, just being ahead of its time, especially for from the Beatles. This was coming up. You have the White Album and Sgt. Pepper and everything they had done up to this point. For them to be able to just set all their problems aside and write a record like this, it's pretty impressive. And again, a lot of these albums, if you've never heard them before and you're interested in checking them out, these are ones that I recommend, because these are the ones that, for me, I had to have them. There was no doubt about it. This album, Pinback, I mentioned it on my Goblin Cock album review, or my unboxing. Pinback is this is one of those bands that kind of caught me off guard, and when I say that, it's because a buddy of mine got into this album, and he, recommended, or he put it on one time we were at his house, and the first song is Non-Photo Blue, and it just like got stuck in my head. And I remember going over there like a couple weeks later and saying, hey, what was that? What was that album that you put on the other day? I got it stuck in my head. And we listened to it again, and I went out and bought it, and I just listened to it over and over again. And it's like I hate to categorize stuff, but it's like indie rock. But there's just something about this album and I love Pinback. I mean, ever since this album I heard this, I've purchased everything of theirs virtually. But there was just something about this album that was special to me, and I can't. Maybe it was just the time frame when it came out, and just I don't know. Maybe it was just kind of one of those things that kind of caught me off guard, because I wasn't expecting to just get hooked on it like I did. But this is a great, kind of mellow indie rock album, and I highly recommend it to anybody. And again, that's Pinback, Summer in Abaddon. I see it's still out there online, so you should be able to get it. And lastly, I've already done a video on this record, Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. Again, I think I said it in that video. If you've never heard jazz, like actually sat down and listened to jazz music, and you want to start somewhere, this is the granddaddy of them all. Kinda Blue. You've probably heard it and don't know it if you're not into jazz music, but it is a masterpiece. It's got like a all-star cast of musicians that are in on this album, which is part of probably why it became such a big album. But yeah, you can get this album on many formats over and over again. They've released it on just about every format you can imagine. And again, if you want to start somewhere as far as jazz music, start here. This is one of the greatest, if not one of the greatest albums of all time. And that's my 10 of my life-changing albums. There's probably a few that I could have put in here, but these are ones I was flipping through my collection and I thought I'd share with you all. Make comments. I would love to hear from you about the albums that changed your life, and if you have any stories on any of the ones that I put on here. Subscribe. I'll have more coming. I got some more unboxing videos coming out. Take care.